What is your biggest, it's one banana, what can it cost, $10 moment? I once got asked to watch my buddy's mom's dog. Cute Pomeranian, super well behaved. I was stoked to watch the little dude. She messaged me and told me where the garage key was and that she left a couple $100 on the table for me. A couple hundred? I showed up at noon and took the money and the dog and went into town. Took him to the dog park, then the beach, and then we kicked it and napped for a couple hours. Dropped him off around 6 p.m. It was the easiest $200 I've ever made. I kind of have one. I work in estate management as a side gig and most of my clients are wealthy. It's usually the kids who are out of touch. I once spent 10 minutes trying to explain the concept of used cars to the college-aged daughter of one of my clients. She just could not grasp that some people buy cars that are not brand new. She seemed to think that after a car gets used for a while, it gets returned to the dealer and shipped off to a poor country. It was really bizarre. She was pre-med too. Had a roommate in college who was pretty well off. I was pretty much putting myself through school and was almost always broke. One day we went by the ATM that dispensed in $5 increments. Yeah, I made damn sure I knew where those were. Anyway, turns out I had less than $5 in the bank. So looked at my buddy and said, well, looks like no beer for me tonight. He literally looked at me and said, well, just take it out of your other account. I just stared at him and asked what he meant. Turns out he legit thought that everybody had a second account their parents kept filled with emergency money. He did buy beer that night though, so he was a good guy, just kinda clueless. Kinda the opposite, but I once went out with the ultra wealthy parents of this girl I was dating, and they made a big deal of me ordering whatever I wanted and getting appetizers and dessert and drinks and everything. And once I put in like a $75 single person order, her dad just ordered 2 hot dogs and laughed at how expensive my meal was. It was the most expensive lunch I had ever had at that point, and I really respect that man's trallery. He had a much better sense of humor than his daughter. I have an aunt and uncle who are both experienced aerospace engineers, retired military officers, now higher ups at private contractors, so they make an obscene amount of money. You can always tell how much they've lost touch with the value of a dollar when you look at presents they've bought. One time years ago at Christmas, they bought my aunt a $600 iPod and my mom a $20 trillion shirt. They didn't mean any insult, they just thought my mom would like a shirt better and that my aunt would like an iPod better, and they didn't even look at the prices of them. Nick Cage was famous for this. He owned 8 mansions, 2 castles and a couple yachts. Every one of them was fully staffed at all times and had full fridges of food on hand in case he decided to stay there. Some of the properties he bought and never spent a single minute there. Day after day, year after year, the staff did the grocery shopping for fresh food that was never eaten, changed the sheets in beds that were never slept in, mowed the lawns, cleaned the pools, etc etc. Yes, he went bankrupt. Had a friend tell me that he was done dealing with mutual friend because they had given up on themselves. What they had actually done was worked for a year before starting grad school because their father isn't a millionaire who has paid all their bills into their 30s while they played around and had fun with hobby jobs without having to worry about financial security. It wasn't really a banana, it was more that they didn't understand how much life actually costs when you pay your own bills and thought less of people for working to pay their bills. I sold hash to a business partner of my dad's when I was in college. I had a variety and it was the only drug he enjoyed. He obliquely asked me to bring it over to him. No discussion of what or how much. I biked over to his very nice place and he had a coffee and a chat, and I simply handed it to him and was getting ready to leave, thinking maybe he'd have my dad pay me. Nope. As I left there was an envelope on next to the rear entrance. It contained $500 for like $80 of hash. He would repeat this several times. He just needed a source he could trust and not raise eyebrows. When my dad passed, he helped manage the estate, and we had an implicit mutual trust that made things go much easier. In college, as I was making dinner one night, my wealthy roommate expressed surprise that you could get vegetables in a can, like totally in shock at the idea of canned vegetables. It turns out that in his house the cook simply went down to the market every afternoon to pick up fresh veggies, and he'd never known it could be done any other way. Edit. Just to clarify, yes, canned vegetables are a real thing in America and were pretty popular as a cheap alternative. Even today, the canned vegetable section of the supermarket takes up most of a full row. Yes, fresh veggies are the way to go, being cheaper and more delicious. This was not a post about the virtues of canned vegetables, but about the idea of someone so isolated by money that they had never been in a grocery store. I worked at a very expensive and exclusive country club, the type you'd see the Bluths at. One of the members drove her golf cart over from her house and said the help had forgotten to buy a loaf of bread and wanted to buy one from our kitchen. I told her that we couldn't sell her a loaf of bread, so she asked how many sandwiches a loaf of bread can make. I ended up selling her 10 sandwiches with nothing on it at $7 a piece. Hope this goes here. I repair bathtubs and showers. I've been in poor homes, middle class homes, wealthy homes and super mansions. So we were at this mansion, the kind where there's a tennis court and pool in the backyard. The kind where the foyer and first room of the house had 16x16 black granite tile with subfloor heating. Just this magnificent house with its 3-car garage, but in the garage there were 3 lifts to literally stack their vehicles. These fuckers were loaded. They are updating the house to sell, so they can move back to North Jersey. They replaced the soaking unit in the master. The granite in that bathroom was absolutely breathtaking. It was blue, and under a certain light, sparkled like there were lights built into it. The deck was cracked at the cork line. So we are in there fixing it. Being as anal and meticulous as possible BC, we know we are in probably the most expensive house ever. The wife comes in to chat with us and basically states that they just got the same kind of soaker as before BC. It's the only thing that fit in the spot. Eventually she says something like, it's okay though, it was only $8,000. If I was drinking something, I'd have choked on it. She said it like the tub was a piece of shit that she settled for BC. It was cheap. $8,000 was a drop in the bucket. TL. Doctor, rich woman referred to an $8,000 soaking tub as cheap in so many words. This kind of reminded me of a story where a co-worker told me a story involving his wife. She worked as a personal assistant to some woman in a wealthy part of the city, and the two were cleaning out a closet when the woman found a check for $50,000 in one of her suits, dated from over a year ago when she last wore it. Oh, right, she remembered. Something about getting paid $50,000 for a horse they sold, and she'd mislaid the check and completely forgot about the debt. Chump change to her. I'm wicked late to this, but back when I was a cashier at Chipotle, I had a woman misunderstand the price of a burrito. She heard me say that'll be $7.28, and without any hesitation, counted out 8 $100 bills from a wad of cash that must have been several $1,000s. We had a good laugh when she realized her mistake. She was carrying a suitcase and had a thick accent, so I think it may have been her first cash transaction in the US, and she was just so rich that it didn't occur to her that $800 was a shitload of money to spend on a burrito. A friend of mine was dating a super wealthy girl in college. Not sure how they got together. It was some internship thing or something. He grew up pretty poor, and he told me a story about how they were at Walmart, and he was considering buying a pair of flip-flops, but they were like $10 and he wasn't so sure it was something he could afford at the time. Apparently she said to him, "What do you mean? You don't know if you should get them? Whenever I want new clothes, I just ask my daddy for the money card." She literally used the phrase "the money card" as if it was some weird artifact that magically made all clothes free for her, which I guess it kinda did. He also told me she felt the need to take a full shower every time she pooped, which, I mean, that's a different thing, but still funny. I worked at the concession stand at a movie theater, and it was opening weekend for a large Marvel movie and the line was super long to get popcorn. This rich millionaire dude from India walked up to me and handed me his Amex Black card and waved a hand over the entire line of customers and said whatever they want, my friend, and plopped it down hard on the glass counter. I'm just like, are you sure? Him, whatever they are want. With a huge smile on his face he waited as the entire line ordered shit tons of food, entire combos, large everything, extra candy. I was like, you total is up $10,718.62 and I swiped the card and it said transaction complete and he said thank you my friend and he went to watch his movie having fed everybody in line. Absolutely unreal moment. And no, I didn't get a tip or anything, but now I have a cool story to tell on Reddit. Complete strangers with just an unlimited budget to spend on movie snacks and drinks thanks to this man they didn't even know. This is sort of an opposite comment. I work at a big software company with some fairly well-heeled individuals. One night I was out drinking with a group of people and was ready to leave. There's a girl there whose father is on the board. She's super cool, but also has unimaginable wealth. She was leaving at the same time, so I offered to walk her home. Since she lived in the city and I had to catch an Uber out of the city, we walked for a bit and she asked me why I was so into waking if I was going to get an Uber anyways. I told her I was walking out of the surge pricing zone. The look on her face, it was like I had introduced her to a concept that she could not fathom. My sister and I, both Latin American, befriended a Chinese girl in college. We always helped her in studying and with her English. Turns out her dad was some billionaire in China who owned a chemical producing company. She drove an expensive Audi and for the longest, up until 2 years ago, I was freeloading off the check account she opened up for me. That account was paid for about 3 years. Whenever she'd invite us to go eat, the bills were super expensive, like $300 plus for just 3 people, but she played it off like they were nothing. I had never once eaten a single meal over $40 per plate until we ate with her. She'd always take us Starbucks, food and on a couple occasions bought us books for school. At one point we went shopping with her. She wanted a laptop. She was gonna buy me one too, but I felt too guilty to accept it. Laptop was $3,000, some Apple laptop. I felt like it was too much. She was really cool and treated my sister like her sister. She was living alone and didn't know many people. We were always friendly with classmates and that's how she got to know us. My sister and I are from low-income families. The money that was spent around her was ridiculous. Like $300 to $400 plus per lunch almost every day. That was around my weekly pay back then. Really miss her though. She was funny to be around with and always wanted to learn more about the US. Always insisted we go out with her to movies, shopping or dining, and teach her about our culture. Have not heard from her in 3 years. She went back to China and we never saw her on campus again. I grew up surrounded by wealthy kids who had no idea how money worked. When we were preteens and the holidays came around, everyone was talking about their presents. So I said I was super excited because I was getting a new video game that I really wanted as a present. It was the expanded version of Zoo Tycoon. One of my classmates said to me, "So when are you getting your golf cart?" I just stared at him and said, "Aren't those super expensive?" He laughed and replied, "It's not that bad. I already wrecked my old one, so this is a replacement and is basically free." I just started at him thinking to myself, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. A upscale club in Nick. I had brought S table and a few bottles which cost me $500. After my bottles were done and my crew was mingling, I was just chillin' but super thirsty, so I walk up to another table and ask for some of their water. My table was done and we were moving on. The dude thought I was a saint for asking permission, then proceeded to buy me a $29 cocktail, then order another 6 bottles of liquor for us and his table. I'm like, "Please no sir, we don't need the booze and that's a lot of money." He looked at me and said, "What's that, like $1,000? Don't worry, I now own the place." Turns out he had literally just brought the club that night for millions of dollars. He's still my friend and a stand-up guy. Still gets me and my friends in for free/W a table. Name's Paul. Just came from an uber rich Chinese family. One of the owners of my company spoils the hell out of his kids. Their family has been wealthy going back at least 4 generations, so not one of them has ever struggled financially. I, working as a laborer for them in my 30s, was looking to buy a car after finally getting my license back after a few years without it. I was looking for rebates and good deals because I was living paycheck to paycheck. As I was browsing cars online and talking to a coworker about deals and loans, one of the rich boys said to me, "Why don't you just buy the car with cash so you don't have to make payments?" When I told him I can't afford that, he replied, "Why don't you just have your parents buy it for you?" It didn't seem to occur to the team that I wasn't working for fun and how I didn't make enough to just buy a car outright. To illustrate how it wasn't just a one-time occurrence, his brother casually explained to me a few weeks later how he was giving up his pilot lessons because he was choosing to take up yachting instead. When I said how he'd love to be able to take flying lessons, he told me it was only $200 per hour. He seemed shocked when I told him I don't even make $20 an hour. They're good kids, but goddamn, are they spoiled and sheltered. I sort of had this moment when visiting Indonesia. There was a kid selling these cool rubber band flying toys and I asked how much. He held up 5 of his fingers, so I gave him $5. He walked off with a huge grin on his face. Our guide later told us he meant 5 cents. But honestly, the $5 meant nothing to me, and I'm happy for the kid to have it if it means a better meal for him and his family. At university, I was heading through the main campus building with a friend after a class. I was heading to the bus stop, to the parking lot, and there's an enormous staircase getting from the 4th floor to the ground floor. I'm not sure what happened, but someone bumped hard into me, and I took a bit of a tumble. I was mostly fine, if a bit sore, but my glasses were annihilated. I had just a few months back bought a new pair and used the student insurance's coverage on it, so I was facing an expensive bill to get a new pair, one I could hardly afford, having grown up pretty poor and not having much of any money to my name. I hadn't known how wealthy my friend was until she was consoling me in my panic state over how I was going to afford a new pair when I'd already allocated the next 6 months of my budget. I was tearing up when she told me, "Hey, it'll be okay, these things happen. I'm sure it can't be much more than $1,500, right? Just eat out a few times less in the next month or 2 and it'll be covered." When I told her it'd be around $200, she was completely stunned that I was worrying about an amount that was less than what she'd spend on wine each weekend. What is your biggest "it's one banana, what can it cost, $10" moment? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. For more content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel.